This week's episode is sponsored by HelloFresh. If you want to find out how to get 10 free meals delivered right to your door, stick around to the end of the show and I'll show you how. Football teams are built around three main pillars: passers, pass rushers, and pass protectors. If you don't have good players at all of those positions, you're probably not going to win very many games, and that's why several teams in the top 10 of this year's NFL Draft have a very crucial question to answer later this April. Out of all the great pass protectors in this class, which one is the best? If you polled all of the GMs in the league, two of the most popular answers would undoubtedly be Iowa's Tristan Wirfs and Alabama's Jedrick Wills, and both of them just happen to be a couple of my favorite players in this class as well. But despite their abundant similarities and closeness in overall grade, they also have some rather stark differences that I think really separate them from each other, with Wills in particular, in my opinion, being clearly the better player of the two. Now, considering that Wirfs just had maybe the most impressive combine performance by any offensive lineman ever, claiming that he's not even the best tackle in his own draft class might sound crazy to you. But just hear me out here, because there's a lot to nitpick with Wirfs from a coaching perspective, maybe even more than people realize at this point, to be honest. And if you're anything like me, all of those technical problems that still need to be fixed really add up when it comes to giving a final grade. When you watch Wirfs a lot, like I have, what really starts to stick out as a pattern is his pass protection style. He generally likes to take angle sets, meaning his kick slide is going back at a 45-degree angle rather than straight vertically or horizontally. Naturally, if his kick slide was more vertical, it would be called a vertical set, and if it was more horizontal and wide, it would be called a jump set, but we'll get into that a little bit more later in the show when we're ready for it. For now, let's just stick to angle sets because the vast majority of the time, that's what Wirfs used at Iowa, but his style of angle sets is interesting to me because they're a bit uneven, or at least more uneven than a lot of offensive line coaches would like them to be. Typically, Wirfs starts his kick slide in an angle set with two really short, conservative steps at that 45-degree angle. He doesn't really fire out of his stance that much compared to some other tackles, but then most of the time on his third step, he brings that post foot in really narrow so that he can gain a lot of ground deep into the pocket on that third kick step. It's almost like he tries to get all of his depth and choke off the angle around the edge all at once, rather than just keeping every step quick and evenly spaced from start to finish. And at the same time, while he puts both feet vertical, meaning perpendicular to the line of scrimmage, he likes to reach and punch, almost kind of lunging a bit just so that he can establish contact early and start to overpower people just with his raw strength. And for the record, by the way, I actually like that hand placement. You're supposed to punch high with your outside hand and low with your inside hand, so that placement is good. He's correct for that. But my problem with it is that if you kick your outside foot so deep and point your hips vertical, that tends to also pull your shoulders to be perpendicular to the line of scrimmage as well, which is the last thing you want to be doing if the rusher is squaring up with you and coming right at you. I'll use an example from the NFL to show what happens if you get sloppy like that against Pro Bowl caliber pass rushers, because they sure won't let you get away with that in the pros like Wirfs routinely got away with it in college. This is Khalil Mack versus Eric Fisher from a few years ago, and it's one of my favorite examples ever of how to execute a proper long arm power move. If your shoulders and feet get vertical like Fisher's are here, again meaning perpendicular to the line of scrimmage, offensive line coaches will refer to that as a soft shoulder because that is a really hard angle for the human body to handle a power rush from. You really want to keep your shoulders as square to the line of scrimmage as you can while you're in your kick slide, because if a pass rusher is going to go up the field and then just use a power move like a long arm to keep pushing you deeper into the pocket, before of course countering up and under inside, you don't want to be absorbing all of that power from the side like Fisher is here. You want to be taking it on from in front of your center of gravity instead. If your shoulders are turned, you take it all from the side, and you have almost no shot of being able to stay balanced. And obviously Fisher found that out the hard way on this play with a very, very rude physics lesson. The same thing happened to Wirfs as well when Michigan figured out that he used the same kind of pass set on almost every play, and in the fourth quarter they punished him with a nasty inside counter, much like the one that punished Eric Fisher. Again, in his kick slide, he started out with those 2 short, conservative steps before really gaining a lot of ground on that 3rd step and putting his hips vertical once more. And just like we saw with Khalil Mack, that Michigan edge rusher, Aiden Hutchinson, immediately attacked that soft shoulder inside and easily moved Wirfs out of the way for a huge sack. It's the same technical problem with both tackles, with mostly the same move punishing it, and these are the kinds of plays that give me reservations about declaring Wirfs to be the best tackle solely just because he's the best athlete. Beyond the physical gifts, it is the smallest of details that can be the difference between great pass protection and terrible protection, and unlike what we see with Wirfs and his inconsistent technique, you almost never see Wills give up pressure to the inside like that because his pass sets are far more controlled. Check out this play against LSU as an example of how to actually handle a long arm move. Wills is going up against Kollmann Chase on here, who's also going to be a first-round pick, mind you, and you can see the difference in control and leverage he has in his pass sets versus Wirfs. Every step is quick and evenly spaced, he's not bringing his base in too narrow just to gain ground, and most importantly, his shoulders are more opened up to the line of scrimmage, and he's presenting the front of his body as a target rather than the side. By the time Chason goes for that long arm move, again, Wills is taking all of that power directly into his chest with his butt low and his knees bent, and he's easily able to absorb it and re-anchor immediately. That right there is how you use your feet to set deep against speed, while also using your shoulders and hips to anchor against power. That is how you're supposed to play tackle in the NFL. And don't get me wrong, watching Jedrick Wills pass protect the quote-unquote proper way doesn't mean that Wirfs never had some great technique in his own right. There were plenty of plays where Tristan was balanced, with a hard shoulder to the inside, and where he didn't completely turn all the way immediately to put himself at a disadvantage, and on those snaps where his technique was better, he was brilliant. In fact, he looked even more gifted than Wills when his feet, hands, and hips were all correct. But the inconsistency of his technique and the infrequency of snaps where he was absolutely perfect really was my biggest concern about him. When he was right, I mean, my God, he was good. But when he was wrong, it sometimes got ugly. An example of that ugliness would be in the Minnesota game where he failed to pick up a TE stunt that led to another sack. And again, I fully acknowledge that this is super nitpicky. It's not like this is some insurmountable, unfixable problem, but it's also a very important part of playing offensive line because communication and awareness is everything in the NFL, and pointing out Tristan's lack of awareness in college really matters when you're trying to split hairs between 2 amazing prospects. With his right guard covered up by a 3-technique defensive tackle and potentially 2 threats to rush off the edge on his side, watch Wirfs' eyes and shoulders here. Again, he's zeroing in on that edge rusher, his shoulder is slightly closed, and he's not using his inside hand as a drag hand to feel for the 3 technique potentially slanting into him to set up that stunt. By the time he saw the edge redirect back inside, it was already too late. The 3-tech already got enough penetration to keep the guard stuck to him, Wirfs couldn't step back inside quick enough to stop him either, and the quarterback got completely swallowed by both rushers simultaneously. If there were ever to be teaching tape on how not to pick up a stunt, that would be it. And Wirfs' technical mistakes are only magnified even further when compared to how Jedrick Wills picked up different kinds of stunts and pressures at Alabama. Pay close attention to Wills' eyes and shoulders here. Unlike Wirfs, Jedrick keeps his eyes dead center between the stand-up 3 technique and the edge so that he can keep both of them in his peripheral vision and keep track of them, and he's also dragging that inside hand behind him as well, just so that he can easily feel the rush and redirect as quickly as possible if he needs to. This is the kind of discipline and awareness that's needed if you want to survive in the league, because it's not just all about being bigger, faster, and stronger than everyone. You have to take angles and timing into account. You have to be able to sense when and where pressure is coming from, and you also have to be able to pick up on body language and context clues that can tell you exactly what you need to know before the ball is even snapped. In fact, that last part about studying hard and I guess you could say outsmarting defensive linemen, that's the thing that impresses me the most about Wills, and it's one of the biggest reasons why I think he's far and away the best offensive tackle in this class. When you're in the NFL, especially starting in the NFL, you have to know your opponent better than they know themselves. You have to know what moves they like, what moves they don't like, certain situations they use those moves in, and even some subtle poker tells that they might give away that can tip you off for what they're going to do. When you go back and watch the Tennessee game in particular, you could see Jedrick's study habits manifest themselves on the field because he literally knew every move the UT defensive linemen were going to throw at him on every play. For instance, if the defensive end was down in a 3-point stance with his outside hand on his knee and his base slightly narrowed, Wills knew that the end was going for a pure speed rush and would likely not be countering back inside at all. And because he knew that, he also knew that he could easily jump set that speed rush with a ton of aggression, punch really early with his inside hand, with those same risky vertical shoulders that we talked about earlier, mind you, and he would be totally safe from power moves that counter that because, again, the edge rusher was really going for speed here instead of power. Then compare that speed rush and his stance to this one, where the defensive end had a wider base with his feet and his outside hand was hanging lower, and Wills played it completely differently. This was on second down, by the way, not third down, and Bama was in a 2-back set, so Wills read that wider stance as the defensive end's preferred way to play the run. After all, a wider base and a lower hand is typically how a defensive lineman will line up if they want to anchor against the run and set a hard edge outside. So because of that stance, Wills knew that a speed rush deep behind the pocket was most likely not going to happen. And instead, he expected that defensive end to just read his keys, bubble slightly outside just in case he needed to set an edge, and then once he read that it was a pass play, he expected him to just come back in for a power move to try to collapse the pocket. All of that is pretty typical from what you see of Darrell Taylor on film at least, but again, Wills knew all of this just based on reading Taylor's stance pre-snap, so he was ready for it. As soon as Taylor inevitably came back in to hit him with that two-handed bull rush, Wills used a perfectly timed trap technique himself to bat Taylor's hands down, and because Taylor was so far over his toes when his hands got batted, he had nothing there to hold him up, and he immediately fell face first to the grass where Wills could pancake him. It was an amazing pre-snap read, and an even better execution of the trap technique to pay it off. How about this play too, just to drive home this overall point even more, where Wills read the ET stunt coming pre-snap because of the end stance giving it away once again. With the edge rusher's outside foot being back instead of the inside foot being back, that can often be a tip-off that some sort of inside move is coming, because with their feet aligned that way, it allows the end to load up and push off with that outside foot on their very first step out of the gate, which of course helps them to generate as much immediate burst to the inside as possible. But since Wills knew that it was coming because he read that stance, he was not caught off guard at all, and he was easily able to redirect inside with a flat post step to seal off the B-gap. It didn't matter what Tennessee threw at him. Stunts, blitzes, power, speed. Wills was ready for anything and everything because he studied his ass off, he had terrific instincts, and obviously he had a really versatile toolbox to deal with a wide variety of threats. If you compare his technique and discipline to, honestly, not just Wirfs, but to every other tackle in this class, to me it's not really a discussion. He's the best one. Period. And I know that this episode may come off as a huge negative against Tristan Wirfs to some, but that's really not what it's about. I honestly think Wirfs is a top 15 pick. I love the guy, and I've given him a monster grade because his potential is truly limitless. But the whole point of this show was to demonstrate how even a tremendous prospect that is almost ready to start can still look like he's got a really long way to go when you compare him to a prospect that is ready to start. Do I think that Wirfs is going to be a good player? Probably, yeah, but I also think that his success kind of depends on the coach that he ends up with, and if that coach can iron out all of his bad habits. When it comes to Jedrick Wills, though, there's no real bad habits to iron out. He's got incredible feet, his hands are made of dynamite, he genuinely enjoys burying people in the run game, just ask the Auburn front seven about that. He's incredibly smart, he studies every opponent before every game and knows them better than they know themselves. I mean, there's flat out nothing wrong with him. Out of all the great talents on that Alabama roster, Tua, Judy, Ruggs, Waddle, Smith, McKinney, the list goes on and on, Jedrick Wills was their best player, and I'm not really sure it was even close. I get that Tristan Wirfs is a freak of nature, I get that there's the possibility of his future coaches harnessing that athleticism and turning him into a Hall of Fame level talent, but truth be told, if I'm a general manager and I desperately need a pass protector, I already see a Hall of Fame level talent in front of Wirfs that is way less risky. To me, sometimes the safest answer to the question is the best one, and in this case, the safe answer is very clear. If you already have a quarterback and you have your choice of any offensive tackle in this class to protect him, it is not a hard decision. Take Jedrick Wills. Thank you so much for watching this week's episode, and again, thank you to our sponsor this week, HelloFresh. I'm sure by now you guys know how long this show in general takes to make. Most of the time it's about 60 hours per episode. That's probably what this episode's going to end up landing on too. And between myself working 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, and my wife also working a crazy number of hours, we just flat out don't have time to shop on most days. So HelloFresh has been a godsend in the weeks that we do get it, because we have those fresh ingredients that we would normally buy from the store anyway, delivered right to our door. Everything is perfectly portioned out for us, and above all, it's just freaking delicious. One of the recipes they just sent me this week was for a Monterey Jack burger with roasted potato wedges, and like I said, I love cooking a lot. It's one of my biggest passions other than football, but again, I just never have that much time to shop anymore, especially on weekdays. So since HelloFresh sent me a bunch of raw ingredients and a recipe to work off of that I didn't really have to plan myself, I was allowed to just use some of the other ingredients that I have around my house to get a little bit creative and make their burger the way I wanted to. Like for instance, I did the potatoes with some white truffle oil from my cabinet because any combination of truffle and potatoes is amazing in general, and instead of making the garlic mayo to go on the burger, since I'm not really a mayo person, I roasted the garlic cloves HelloFresh sent me instead and used the combination of onion powder and paprika in the fry seasoning to create basically a roasted garlic, onion, paprika compound butter, which I then used to toast the buns they sent me and make them taste, I mean, I can't even describe how good it was. And whenever I make burgers from home from now on, I'm gonna make that compound butter again because it was ridiculous. The patties were great, the potatoes themselves were awesome. I could have thrown the meat on the grill in the backyard, I guess, but I wanted to show that even if you don't have a grill, it's still very possible to make an excellent burger with the ingredients and the recipes they send you. And keep in mind that there are 22 seasonal chef-curated recipes for you to choose from every single week on HelloFresh, just so that you can be as creative or as exploratory as possible. If you're new to cooking and you've never homemade a burger yourself, or roasted your own potatoes, or baked chicken, or made couscous, or pork bibimbap, HelloFresh is an excellent tool to do that in a controlled environment and just get better and more inventive with your cooking. And the actual cost of each meal is now at only $5.66 per serving too, which is on par with my local grocery store if I was going to go buy the same ingredients to make the same thing. And it's also way cheaper than if we went to a restaurant to grab takeout. So overall, not only was it convenient, and it helped me and my wife discover some different foods that we've never had before, but it also helped to save us some money as well, because in the weeks that we do have HelloFresh, we never need takeout. For someone like me that works constantly and doesn't have the time or energy to shop or cook on some nights, HelloFresh has been a lifesaver, and I cannot recommend it enough. There's a reason why they're the #1 meal kit in America, so if you want to try them out for yourself just to get a taste of how convenient and easy it will make your life, please check them out at HelloFresh.com at the link in the description below, and use promo code FILMROOM10 to get 10 free meals in your first month with free shipping just for trying them out. Again, thank you to HelloFresh for sponsoring us. And as for me and channel news before I wrap this up, I just want to let you know that I finally just launched a podcast called the Bootleg Football Podcast with my buddy EJ. It's available everywhere podcasts are distributed, links down below, of course. And I also just started a second YouTube channel solely for that project as well that's going to have a ton of extra content thrown up there too. So check that out, subscribe to it, check out the pod, tell me if you like it. And I'll be back sometime next week here with another Film Room episode. Still not sure what it's going to be about because I still don't have all the footage that I really want on Darnay Holmes to do his own episode, but I'll get to him eventually when I do get that footage, I guess. Either way, something is coming next week. Whatever it is, I'm sure you'll like it, no matter who it is on. And yeah, until then, later.